brief intro of yourself. You're a business developer at PolyCrypt, and I see that you have a bachelor's degree in nanoscience. I'd definitely like to ask you a couple of questions there if we have some time later on. So as you can see here, Marcel's presentation will be on DeFi, on Solana, different ecosystem, or same challenges. So please, again, the stage is all yours, and any questions, feel free to ask.
Sure. Thank you very much, Anthony. Yes, I did my bachelor's in something else than I did my master's in. I have a master's degree in economics. And within that context, we recently, a few colleagues, Professor Sandner and Professor Faust and a few others, and I published a SOK, a State of Knowledge on Decentralized Finance. And today we will be talking about the insights of that SOK with a focus a little bit more on Solana. But still, I'd love to refer you to the full paper. It's called Defining DeFi, Challenges and Pathway. And if you want to dive deeper into any of the topics, which I can just scratch in the short time now, yeah, feel free to refer on that. But I'll also gladly take your questions afterwards. All right. Yeah, you already said it. I'm a business developer at PolyCrypt. PolyCrypt builds second layer technology and blockchain-based software. All right, let's get into it. So I was told that I should start with a brief intro on DeFi itself. So what is DeFi? I'm sure most of you are well aware of what it is, and that's why I'm keeping it a little bit shorter. So decentralized finance is basically the term for the process of using decentralized infrastructure for financial applications, financial services, providing them on distributed ledger technology like Solana, like Ethereum. And that is a great idea, given that there are currently around 2 billion people who have access to some smart device, some smartphone, some laptop with internet connection, but do not have access to a bank account. So for them, DeFi is definitely an attractive tool. So, however, if you're, let's put it that way, mainstream, somewhat blockchain fan, you've probably also read in the headlines of a great pitfall of DeFi. And that is, for example, it is the main driver of transaction costs on Ethereum, where it is currently very, very large. We'll get into a comparison on that one in a second. And all in all, DeFi is a way in which global financial services can be provided, A, on a decentralized infrastructure, and B, in a trustless way. And that is something that really captures the spirit of why DLT was invented in the first place. If you remember, the white paper of Bitcoin often refers to the financial crisis. And that is why DeFi is especially relevant to the space, I believe. So on the right-hand side, you see the graphic of how traditional financial systems and decentralized finance are or can be connected. They are currently still connected over a centralized exchange. So there's a centralized gateway, but then you are moving in a decentralized ecosystem. And that is not only interesting for retail investors, but in the long run will also be interesting for firms and of course for developers. And as you can see, there's tremendous amounts of DeFi, value locked in DeFi across all blockchain systems. So by now it's over 200 billion US dollars in value, which is a ridiculous amount of money if you think about it. And that graph looked the same 1 year ago, which means that the growth of the sector has been basically exponentially. So on the potential of DeFi, again, very briefly, DeFi has a tremendous potential market for the reasons I just described, and also for the reason of offering financial services within a completely new asset class, namely crypto, and also providing the services that the traditional financial sector offers on decentralized infrastructure, which is a great deal. You cannot state that often. DeFi is no means to itself, but the basis for a digital economy. It is an incentive-driven and trustless market where you kind of need to stick to your word, and your skin is always in the game, which is quite crucial in turbulent times as we are currently experiencing. And we might, or we should have seen more DeFi, even more DeFi than we already did. But sadly, we didn't because of probably two reasons we found out. One is strained infrastructure, which is hopefully not as big of a topic for the Solana blockchain. And on the other hand, there's also the still low DLT adoption. And independent of the ecosystem we are talking about, the right-hand graphic is pretty much valid. So there's, as I already stated, the centralized exchange, doing know your customer, doing a little bit of AML usually as a somewhat centralized gateway to the DeFi space. And once you enter it, you have access to several services, which we will have a closer look at on the next slides. Then, of course, there's always, when you talk about financial services, not everything is on a blockchain. And that's why some information needs to be put on blockchain, which comes from the real world. And that's where oracles come into play. Bianca just showcased some very relevant that are also working with the Solana ecosystem. So yeah, so that's working also in a decentralized and trustless fashion, and also in a tamper-proof way. And then there are off-chain ecosystems. They are quite relevant for the medium future probably of several blockchain ecosystems, to help them scale, to help them introduce functionality which is not introduced on the layer 1 itself. However, not as crucially important for the Solana network, as it's far better scalable than many other networks out there. Okay, I already talked a little bit about the components of DeFi. There's lending and borrowing platforms. You can swap assets decentrally on decentralized exchanges. There are specific financial products which you can interact. You can, of course, do payments. And all of that is basically interconnected and interdependent from another, which makes the functionality of the DeFi space grow a lot, even despite smart contracts not being that complex as of yet. On the contrary, on the right-hand side, in the centralized world, you kind of have banks as singular entities, brokers, exchanges, and they are all very independent from another. They are if they weren't sharing the same currency and the same type of bank account, it would be even harder to do to connect their interaction with them, and we are far away from doing plug and play with conventional financial institutions. Now let's have a look at the size of several networks. I already talked a little bit about several networks, namely mostly Ethereum and Solana, and that these two will be the focus of comparison on that slide as well. Currently, Ethereum holds around a little bit less than 70% of the total value locked, and is by far like the most dominant DeFi blockchain. But then I think Solana, with its $12 billion is closing up extremely well, and that is especially remarkable if you consider that 1 year ago there was not 69% of market dominance by Ethereum, but 100%. So in the last 12 months, several other ecosystems, and for good reasons, emerged also being active in the DeFi space. And as Bianca just beautifully stated, there's a blockchain for every taste, right? However, our research also found that Ethereum will not go away. And that's okay, because if you look at the total market size of CeFi, centralized finance, and DeFi, yeah, there's still a lot of ground to cover. That red stripe on the right-hand side, that's DeFi with its 200 billion US dollars. And CeFi has multiple hundreds of trillions of US dollars in value, basically the entire world. And when I showed that chart the last time I held a similar presentation, you could not even see a pixel of DeFi. So DeFi has grown tremendously and will probably continue to do so. And in doing so, will cover a lot of ground. Let's have a look at, let's compare the composition of the two ecosystems a little bit. They are scaled to the same size here for comparability. But taking a closer look, we also see that decentralized exchanges and lending and borrowing platforms are having the greatest market shares in DeFi on Solana and on Ethereum. And that makes a lot of sense because those are currently the most attractive models there are for retail investors in this low interest rate environment. And it's interesting, that comparison, for two reasons. One perspective could be that you say, okay, we have the well-established Ethereum DeFi, and let's have a look at the, if Solana is equally structured. That might be one viewpoint, but another might be, hey, let's see how things might be structured on Ethereum once there is proof of stake, which Solana already has, which is one reason why it's so incredibly scalable. And then you see that staking pops up as services around staking pop up as very relevant and crucial part of the Solana ecosystem. And that says a lot. Oh, that's an interesting perspective to take. Now, there are, of course, also challenges for all of these ecosystems. You have lots of them, and sadly, I cannot go into detail with all of them. We will have a look at two. One you might laugh about, which is limited scalability, and the other one is security and stability, excuse me. But it needs to be stated that regulatory issues, privacy issues, on and off ramping, and Oracle issues are also very, very crucial aspects for Solana, but I'd ask you to read up more on that in the paper. Now, limited scalability. This one will be brief with Solana, I promise. Simply because Solana scales far better than Ethereum, and on Ethereum this was a large problem. Everything became expensive and slow, and that was annoying. And we identified some solutions for that, which would be, for one, a more effective consensus mechanism, which is somewhat not relevant for Solana, and on the other hand, sharding, which is, as explicitly stated, not desired for the Solana ecosystem. Because if you have a closer look at the Solana ecosystem, the official Solana podcast is named #NoSharding. The reason for this, the CEO said it's a major security risk. Yeah, I'm not getting into that discussion. But still, one identified solution for a problem which is there, but not as bad, is layer 2 technology. For example, rollups or agnostic protocols to allow for a higher degree of functionality. And why did I still talk about limited scalability despite Solana being so well scalable? Well, because recently we had this scalability glitch. So there was this downtime, which leads me to talk a little bit about stability. So different sources say different amounts of hours, but for a little bit more than 10 hours, the Solana mainnet beta shut down. And these things happen, and it's absolutely fine to say better now than in the future when we are really getting big. But as a researcher, I'm just wondering, is resource exhaustion, and usually in these networks you have the weakest link, the weakest validator will be the bottleneck. Will resource exhaustion be a new attack vector? And did the shutdown affect any integrity of the system in any way? And were the learnings learned? These things will be observed in the future, and I'm keen to see it. And then, of course, Solana also has the challenge of very regular security challenges. For example, smart contract vulnerabilities, because in every smart contract there can be a bug, because even the best developer in the world, I'm very sorry for that, can code a bug into their code, and that's absolutely fine. But these bugs on DeFi result in large public bug bounty programs, basically, which is not intended to happen because there's lots of money on the line, as we can see in several examples, although those are Ethereum based. And then as a last point, as a last challenge, in terms of security, there's interdependence weaknesses possibly, because we always, in regard of DeFi, we always talk about money Lego, about the interdependence of the protocols, and therefore the protocols have to be viewed as interdependent, and therefore the security of a protocol has to be evaluated in that with that interdependence in mind. For example, on Ethereum there was front running and flash loan attacks, which are perfectly legal, I'd say, not an expert though, and which were not really based on any bug, but they were just exploits. And similar, if not the same, might be possible one day also, obviously, on other ecosystems, and probably are already possible in some way. And that is something, these interdependence weaknesses, they become even more important in the future. Now, trends. DeFi grows. That's the first 2 points. There's an uptake in unique wallets by at least 7-fold since 1 year ago. This trend will continue. And also in TVL, the 3000% sounds a little ridiculous, but that's also true, and this will also continue. There's a large problem that completely independent of the ecosystem will prevail: regulatory uncertainty. And that regulatory uncertainty also provokes or reduces the recognition of DeFi in broader society and for institutions. And these aspects keep co-enforcing each other. And that is currently probably the greatest external challenge that DeFi and the DLT space are facing. Scalability issues prevail on some chains, not as much on, well, scaling chains like Solana and Ethereum. That will alleviate some pressure, but even that is not completely resolved on every, even for those, probably not completely resolved once the sector really grows. And of course, the Ethereum dominance, I already said it, is shrinking and will probably keep shrinking. And that's why on the last slide, I want to briefly talk about interoperability. Interoperability and cross-chain communications can help to execute cross-chain contracts, to take the best out of two worlds and to make your, well, financial assets interact with the best of several ecosystems. And we already talked, I think, a few hours ago about wrapping and swaps, and that is definitely part of it. But if you want to go a layer deeper in terms of complexity, then you need more than mere swaps. You want to execute arbitrary logic, and you want that well scaling, and you want that trustless. And that is what we believe might be a very big topic in the near future. I thank you very much for the for your attention, and I will be taking questions if there's still time left. Reach out to me, and yeah, check out the paper if what I said was interesting to you.
Marcel,
yeah,
such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope I was on time. I didn't check, to be honest.
Yes, we still have even some time for questions, even a little break if need be. But yeah, that covers so much in the ecosystem. And what, even just on a personal standpoint, do you think that more protocols will adopt proof of history? Do you think there'll be more hybrid models in general, or what do you see as the consensus there?
Well, you're talking about different ecosystems, blockchains adopting a proof of history. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think. Not. I think everyone kind of wants to come up with their own solution, and we will see that happening for the next 2 or 3 years. And I'm really looking forward to see which one will be the dominating one, or the dominating 2 or 3 might be. Yeah, I think no, we will not witness that one day everyone goes snap and says, yeah, definitely proof of history. I don't expect that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's like there's their own game that everyone's playing among themselves to see who can win there. But it's true, it'll probably be a variety, if not 2 or 3. And that's what's looking like it's going towards. So we do have a couple questions here from Yip. One of them being, what is the biggest misconception about DeFi?
Okay, yeah, I've often heard it's just a money laundering scheme, and only people which are yeah, that was probably the biggest one, that DeFi is kind of a pyramid scheme, and it's only worth it for those who put in millions. That's simply not true. I kept reading that, and I couldn't find any evidence for that. And I don't know how people came up with that, to be quite honest. That's probably the biggest and most severe misconception. Yeah.
Exactly. And adding to that, if there are any other myths that have been attributed to the term or to the cause.
Myths about DeFi. Well, I've heard lots of stuff that was definitely not true, but I'm not sure if there's big myths. I think a little bit of a myth is that DeFi is only interesting in the financial context. I think in the long run, if we really have a digital economy, if we really have this decentralized economy, then it's also going to be relevant for institutional investors and for firms. And yeah, it's currently thought of as the alternative to a bank account. I hope that's only a medium run thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely goes hand in hand with how people view legitimacy as well, right? And I think because there are being new shifts in the industry and just a new model or infrastructure overall, there's of course some hesitancy as to how to adopt it and making sure that's regulated properly. So I think we're in this weird gray in between stage that where we're making that transition.
Yeah, I hope so, because it really depending on the country you live in, it becomes really messy if regulation is kind of too strict. Or if none exists. I think for regulators, they have a really hard job to do in not killing that innovation, but also kind of regulating it in a way that makes sense for institutions.
Yeah, there's this polarity between globalization and then jurisdiction. So that we're trying to find the ideal balance there.
Yeah. I'm living in Germany, and I read up on the tax laws on DeFi, and I didn't get it. I just gave up.
Yeah, there's so much. I know. Likewise, there's sometimes too much to go over, and it's difficult to digest because it changes as well. So you dive so much into one concept, a couple weeks later, it's a whole new paper. So
yeah,
something to always be updating and reiterating and on the lookout for. That's for sure.
Definitely.
Well, thank you. That was so complex and so much more to dig into from there. Any last remarks that you have, or anything that you'd like to refer people towards?
No, I thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to watch the next presentations, and I wish everyone all the fun. Thanks, Vanessa.
Yes. Lovely. Well, thank you so much. We'll be in tune, and next session will be in about 5 minutes. So thank you, guys.